Okay, good morning. Welcome to House Revenue Committee this morning on a beautiful Thursday morning in Capital City. Okay, we have some young people here. I just wanted to call out to make sure, WIAC, right? And appreciate you. Now, you're not here advocating for any property tax bills today. You're here to watch the process, so we appreciate you. And was the First Lady, could you stand up? First Lady Gordon, welcome to the committee. Appreciate all your good work and you being here this morning. So thanks for joining us. Yeah, no, it's great to have you. So, okay, members, we have two bills. Now, first thing on the agenda, hey, I've done this before. The first thing we're gonna do, call this to order, we're actually gonna take roll. So Ms. Jeffrey, can you please take the roll?
Good morning, everyone. Representative Bear.
Here.
Representative Byron.
Here.
Representative Locke. Present. Representative Northrup.
Here.
Representative Oakley. Here. Representative Storer.
Here.
Representative Strock.
Here.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Here.
Chairman Harshman. Thank you.
Good. Okay, members, we have two property tax bills. One's with personal property we'll take on later. This first one on the table here is Senate File 54. This is a joint revenue bill. It's been a while since we've seen it in the interim, and it's changed a little bit. If you go down and look at the digest, our friends on the other end of the hall, the senators, there was a nice third reading amendment, a couple others that changed the bill. So we'll talk about those as we work through it. I'd like to, I guess, kind of like how we started in the House, members, and it'll be up to you and your votes, but I'd like to, and members of the public, we'd like to work this bill. And then before we take a final vote on, we'll probably lay it back. I'd like to lay it back. If these guys are in charge, it's all the vote of the majority, but I'd like to lay it back maybe a day, just so we can kind of see. There's only so many vehicles out there that are on property tax that are still rolling through. So we want to make sure that this bill is going to survive to the end with everything that we need to provide the people of Wyoming some property tax relief. So we've got a reform bill or two going through, but this would certainly be a relief bill. So with that, and I'll just walk us through it, I guess. It's our bill, and we'll just tell you what I think has happened to it. So members, as you flip through and flip over to page 2, there's really now two parts of this bill. You can see, I think if you wanted to take a pen or a pencil and on line 9, just draw a big line right across the paper, because this is really the division point of the bill as I look at it. The first one is relief this tax year, 2024, for next fall. And this is every residential real property in the state. This is house, land, outbuildings, everything, 200,000 exemption. Now, and so this is similar to, what would it be? Was it House Bill 52, the homestead exemption, that speaker's bill? I think that was 100,000, but that's a similar provision. There's no application for it. It's going to apply to every house, every residential structure. Okay, so then I think then the bill changes a little bit. So when you start on line 10 and you start with paragraph B, and if you'll actually read on line 14, it says effective beginning tax year 2025 and thereafter. That's where all this bill changes now. And so you come in, now it becomes an application program. So you can read that starts claim, you have to make the application. I'm flipping over to page 3. They have to be in by May of each year. And then on paragraph C on page 3, it talks about where these will be filed with, I think, the county assessor, and then it's going to be paid for out of the legislative stabilization reserve account on line 17. But I think there's really no dates for anything to happen in that paragraph. So if you want to keep it an application program, which I'm not a big fan of application programs, but if you'd If you want to, I think there's going to need to be a date in there. Then you flip over to page 4. It has all the qualifiers for this application program: the owner, primary residence solely, definitions here of what that owner is. Flipping over to page 5, I think on line 6 you can see 8 months a year has to live in it. And then if you go down to line 21 on page 5, that this paragraph's repealed on July 1st, 2026. So it's a 1-year program. And so I read this bill, and you flip over, and then it starts the enactment date. It'll be tax year January 1st, 2024. So I read this bill really as a 2-year exemption bill. Tax year 24 is no application. It'll just be on your tax bill. You'll have a $200,000 exemption. That'd be probably $1,400, $1,350, something like that around the state. And then tax year 25, for 1 year, we're going to institute a program where the local assessor and treasurer are going to have to probably take, I don't know, it's 220,000 properties. Maybe the director can talk about this, but I think there'd probably be a couple 100,000 applications, maybe 150, 200,000 applications for a 1-year program. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. So, I mean, and then I guess my last comment is the first exemption in 24, as I read it, is not backfilled. That is just going to come out of local government, 200,000, and or actually 200,000 per home. So, I mean, and I'm just working off our little penny bill that you guys so graciously passed out of here 8-1. But I think a 200,000 exemption would be like 1 penny. It'd be about 240 to 260 million. So that would be just a reduction to local governments. There's no backfill on that 24. On the 25 year, if you do again, I'm just scratching notes down here, Little League math, but I think 220,000 properties, maybe there's 180, 200 that are eligible. Some people won't know about it, won't apply. They'll be really happy about that. And then probably 180 million out of the LSRA, 200 million out of the LSRA. So that's my thoughts as a fiscal impact of this. 240, say 250 the first year, 200 the second year. 200 the second year is backfill. And I would, Director, it's a problem when you come to a meeting, you might get called on to talk about it, Bill. So if you don't mind, can you come up here and just any of your thoughts or anything maybe in my explanation, if your thoughts that are different or same, or so. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. Excellent job, Mr. Chairman, of going through the bill. Just a couple of questions that I'd wanted to state. As you stated, this bill really does not resemble what it looked like when it first was filed by the Joint Revenue Committee. Just informational, when we go to page 2 on that line 5, when we talk about the 2024 exemption, that $200,000 of fair market value under our current level of assessment of 9.5% equates to $1,900 assessed dollars, which, using the statewide average mill levy of $68,773, that's about $1,300 in actual property tax that this exemption provides for. Now, when we get to B, where it talks about the exemption for 2025, the chairman is accurate. In 2023, we had about 240,000 single-family residential properties. Our information and from economic analysis is that there's about 74% of those that are owner occupied. And so we anticipate by 2025, you're probably going to have about 180,000 applications that would need to be processed. Now, to your point, Mr. Chairman, related to the funding. Now, when I read this, so you've got A, B, C, and I read that as it is applicable to backfill for 2024 and 2025. And with that, one of the suggestions that I had, the language in here talks about the county treasurer providing, and this is on page 3, capital C, the county treasurer providing information to the Department of Revenue. What I would suggest to the committee is considering how we operate and administer the veterans exemption. Very similar, but we've got a statute, 3911-102K, already in statute that states on or before February 1st, county assessors shall certify the exemptions granted pursuant to 3911-105A, Romanet 24. That's your veterans exemption. The assessors report that to the Department of Revenue. We compile that statewide, and then we have to provide a report to the state treasurer of basically what's the total dollar amount that would have been paid had it not been for this exemption. And then the state treasurer's office moves that. So I do have that language with me, Mr. Chairman. Basically, all you would have to do is add this statute to that, and we already have a process. We've got deadlines. The state treasurer's office is familiar with that. So that would be one suggestion I would have in Romanet C, if the committee's interested in considering that. There's only one other item that I wanted to point out, and if you turn to page 5, you'll find in this exemption the definition of residential real property. And we've got a unique situation here because we go down through and we do talk about single family dwelling units, but we are also including mobile homes. So in all of our statutes, mobile homes, titled mobile homes are personal property. Okay, but for this exemption and this exemption only, in the language, we've included mobile homes so that they're eligible for this exemption as well. And so when you look at the fiscal notes, those were included in the fiscal notes. And the reason I wanted to bring it up here is you've got numerous bills that you'll be looking at that include mobile homes in the definition of residential real property, but only for that exemption. But yet you'll have another bill that we'll listen to and consider later this morning where mobile homes are already included. They are legally personal property and included in the numbers that we've done for that exemption. So it's just trying to determine how the legislature wants to, if you're interested in providing property tax relief for mobile homes, how you want to address that. The other piece of this is this particular exemption does include the residential, single-family residential structure, the associated improved land, and all other structures that are associated with that residential structure. So what that means is if I have 35 acres and I have my home, some sheds, but I've got, let's say, a mechanic shop over here on part of my acreage. So that $200,000 exemption couldn't be applied to the value of the mechanic shop because that's commercial. And so just keeping in mind, those are the types of things that county assessors will be having to look at when they're administering this. But I did want to state that, yes, this has an exemption or an effective date of 2024. As you all know, Wyoming statute requires county assessors to have assessment schedules out no later than the fourth Monday in April. So we're getting close. I know they're all, finalizing values as we speak. The CAMA system, since this is applied to all residential property, we have the functionality within the CAMA system to apply that 200,000 or whatever number the legislature deems appropriate on that account automatically. It can be a batch process. We just add it. This particular bill does not have any other criteria, so we aren't worried about if the property was acquired the past year. We aren't worried about, what the structure, if the structure's changed. Those are not considerations in this bill. This bill simply says the assessor values the property at fair market value, and then if it's a single-family residential property, they get $200,000 of fair market value removed from their tax liability. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide that language if you're interested in changing that administrative process.
Okay, thank you, Director. I think Vice Chair Oakley has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. I'm trying to just figure out total numbers here, and I know you're not, don't have the fiscal impact all calculated for us, but you said $1,300, I believe, for the $200,000 exemption. Is that accurate?
That's using, Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, that is using the statewide average mill levy for 2023. So the calculation would be approximately 240,000 properties times $1,300 for 1 year.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chairman.
it. Okay, any other state agencies or elected officials, assessors, treasurers, county commissioners? Good morning. It's been a whole week since we've seen each other.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make a few comments. I am Dixie Huxtable. I'm the Converse County Assessor. I'm going to speak as the Converse County Assessor because our association has not had a chance to review this revised bill with all the changes in it. The couple of concerns we have, the date for the application for the 2025 tax year. So starting on page 2, line 23, where it says not later than, and then going to the next page, it says the fourth Monday in May, we would respectfully ask that to change to February 1st. The timing for us to get those applications in place between the fourth Monday in May and June 1st, when we have to send abstracts in, is not enough time for every county. Even the small counties have small staff. So we would respectfully ask that that change to February 1st. And then back to what the director was just talking about on page 5, if you're thinking of your personal residential house in town, you're probably thinking of a garage, maybe a detached garage, is that other structure. But I ask you to think outside the box to residential land that's sitting on agricultural property. For us to be able to determine the difference, and this is for 24, so I have the Laramie County Assessor with me who is getting ready to mail within a couple of weeks, going in there and being able to determine which of those outbuildings, we call them outbuildings, those other structures are related to the house, the residential versus related to the ag. Now, some of them we will be able to find by the built as or the codes or stuff that we have in the system, but others may be more difficult. So I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm just going to say that it's going to be a challenge for 24 for us to determine if everything that's on that account that's that's got a residential building and it's got 5 other buildings, do they all apply for this exemption? It may not be fiscally a big issue because the house may take up the bulk of the exemption. But I just want you to be aware that that's a concern moving out there for the assessors, determining those other structures, because the language on page 5 associated with the residential structure. And is the detached garage associated? Is the barn associated? How do we differentiate those and identify them in a timely manner to administer this for 2024? We'll do our very best, however the legislature deems appropriate, but we would ask for that date change. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Representative Zwanitzer has a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So by 2025 or 2026, you do believe, I mean, I understand you're not going to be able to do it immediately, but even over a year, I mean, are you going to have to go back and survey properties and ensure what is residential structures and start making determinations? I mean, that seems to me like it would take more than a year to do that. Thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Zwanitzer, we're going to do our best to get it done within 1 year. A lot of it will be directed honestly through rules. The department will provide rules and some guidelines of what we're looking for. And certainly we have the capability within our system to do some querying to find specific type structures. Again, it's going to take a little bit of time to do that and identify them. And then do we need to put a different kind of code or a flag or something? We just don't know. We will work on that for the next year and try to have it in place. And then remember, this bill as written, as I understand, is that application is for 1 year, because then it sunsets in 26. So it
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
it will be an interesting challenge for us, but we're up to the task if that's legislative body's choice.
Okay, Representative Storr has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to confirm that if the language just says residential structure or for 2024, that's something that you can pull out of the CAMA without.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, yes, I believe we are capable of doing just the residential structure. They're in our system by a specific abstract code, so we can pull those codes and apply it. Our best information from the vendor is that we can do that.
Representative Locke has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me ask more, as when the director was talking, she was sort of speaking about those other buildings as some of them are part of the residential property and structure, and there may be a separate building that is considered commercial. Is it impossible for you to make that separate, or is it difficult for you to make that separation of which buildings would be included as part of that residential? Is that, I just want to basically understand that better, because I get this feeling that we want to fall back to the residential structure itself and ignore those outbuildings. And I want to understand in more detail, what is the difficulty of you making that separation of the things that are outbuildings associated with the residential structure versus a building that is commercial? Is that a complex issue? So I want to understand that a little better. Thank you.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
Representative Locke, great question. The buildings typically go into our system with a code, and it's called a built as or an occupancy code. So if it's built as a storage warehouse or a mechanic shop, that's a code that's going to go in there that we could easily identify as a commercial and put the appropriate codes on. If it's a detached garage or equipment storage, and there's no commercial business going on in it, it may have the same code, but it's not a commercial operation, so it's going to come in as a residential equipment building. So it would really take us looking honestly at a lot of those properties one by one to determine. In my county, I have parcels that are not agricultural. They're deemed residential, but they have a barn or they have an equipment storage. They are coded exactly the same as those that are on an ag account that are used for that agricultural commercial business, because that's how our system is currently designed and that's how we pick it up. Doesn't mean it has to stay that way, but it's going to take some time for us to identify those and make sure that we're treating everybody fairly. If this guy has a barn and it's on a residential account, should it be included in this exemption, whereas the agricultural person may not, because he's using his barn in his ag business. So it's not as simple as just looking at one building and determining yes, it is, or no, it's not, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that additional detail. So, but in your system, so the issue is the codes are the same in many cases, but you have potentially in the system have additional detail that you would then have to, for lack of a better term, manually look at. Is that an accurate understanding of what you're discussing there? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, yes, for many counties, that is exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, members, any other questions? Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Ms. Huxtable. A similar line of questioning, I just would like to know, how are you doing it now? Is there a separation of these buildings, these outbuildings under ag, and are they then taxed at a different rate based on their production value versus the residential portions? Is this already divided up in some way?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, Currently, they're all taxed the same way because they're in the same assessment ratio. And they are considered on an agricultural account versus a residential, but they're both at 9.5%. So they're at fair market value. They're not a production value for buildings. That's only tied to the land. So they are treated the same currently in our system because that's the way the statutes read.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your testimony this morning. Okay, any other folks who would like to testify on this bill? We'd open it up for any public comment. We have 4 seats up here. You can come on up and fill those seats up. It'd be great. Good morning, Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. This legislature has a plethora of bills along similar lines like this one. The problem you're trying to deal with is our Constitution simply did not contemplate inflation as a government policy, which came in 1971. And it didn't contemplate the run-up in prices we're seeing these days as people decide Wyoming is better than certain other states. You have people on a fixed income. To put that in perspective, if you take the net effect of the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics cost of living adjustment that they put in each year since 2002, which is when I retired from active duty, it has doubled those incomes for those people that are COLA protected. And your people on fixed incomes are seeing these taxes rise up underneath them, and that's a problem. And so I think you ought to consider things like keeping a senior or allowing a senior to stay in their home is less expensive to Wyoming than putting them in an elder care facility. So I think there's a monetary reason for giving those on fixed incomes relief. But something else I think you need to consider is the mere fact of using $200,000, a fixed number in a bill, is the old way of thinking that's enshrined in our Constitution. Because that number is going to be slowly diminished or eaten away with inflation over the next 20 years. So you might consider something like a percentage instead of a fixed number so that it isn't eaten up. At any rate, however you do it, I believe you all are obligated to act. This is a good first step. There's some other first steps that are going to have to be integrated in some way. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Questions? Okay, thank you for being here. Appreciate your testimony. Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me testify on this.
Go ahead and just introduce yourself for everybody here and where you're from.
Gary Brown, yeah, I'm citizen of Cheyenne, Central Committee member for Laramie County Republican Party. Mr. Chairman, the thing that I was looking at in this bill on page 2 in paragraph B, it talks about not more than one exemption under this paragraph shall apply in the same property in any year, and the owner shall not claim more than one exemption under this paragraph in any year, including a property that houses more than one family. I know some senior citizens here in Laramie County who rent out their basement in order to have a little more income and help pay their taxes. And some of them even rent them to young enough people that they can do their yard work and they can remove their snow. So I would ask if this would disqualify these people because it says more than one family. Is that going to say you have somebody renting your basement, you have more than one family in your home? So this is a concern to me. So if something could be done with that, I think that would be a big help.
Okay, very good. I would like to just kind of remove that whole second year language period, so there's not an application. I just don't think it's, to do all that work for 1 year doesn't make a lot of sense, but I appreciate any questions of Mr. Brown. Okay, thanks, sir. Okay, anyone else? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau. I appreciate this bill. It's going the right direction. As far as I realize there's going to be some extra work that's going to have to go into it, but I do want to point out that any house over a value of 200,000, you won't have to worry about the outbuildings because you've already met the exemption through your house. So hopefully that will cut down on the workload of the county staff. As far as the application, my members have to apply yearly to get a lot of things. Fuel tax rebate, game and fish landowner coupons. We have to do that. It would be nice if they didn't have to. So removing that yearly application would cut down on the workload of the citizens and of the county staff, which is important. When the sunset date and the amount, sunset dates always kind of worry me because I think what the citizens are looking for is something that is permanent. But I do appreciate with the sunset date, we've used them a lot in the past. One thing that does do is it forces you folks as the legislature to come back and revisit that. Not always a bad thing. Most of the time it's a good thing. And I appreciate that it's a firm number. One thing that worries me is, on some things, we try to index it. Well, what index do you use? There's like 16 gazillion billion different indexes that are all, okay, I exaggerate a little bit, but that's a choice another choice you would have to make. What index do we use? I like having the full numbers, the firm numbers. You folks, as the legislature, us as citizens can work on that in the future. We've done that with a lot of different things. Fuel tax is an example. Indexing it just creates other problems. So having the firm number that we as Wyoming citizens will have to work on is not a bad thing. With that, Mr. Chairman, sitting in support of the bill, I would sit for any questions you or the committee may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moline. Vice Chair Oakley has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Moline. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to ask a question, a little tongue in cheek, but I know you can take that. But so you said the sunset date worries you, but I'm wondering if the $300 million in lost revenue worries you at all for your counties.
Well, yes, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, anytime you lose revenue is a concern, but if I heard it right, there might be a little bit confusion, but at least 1 year will be backfilled, and it sounds like perhaps both years will be backfilled. So it's a loss at the state level. The counties and cities, weed and pest districts will be held whole. I realize that does cause a concern because right now the state of Wyoming, much like cattle prices, are doing all right. But in 2 or 3 years, that might not be the case. I think all of us here can remember just a few years ago when you had to cut substantially from the budget. That, I will say, the savings has helped. The cuts weren't near as drastic as what I can remember when I was young back in the 1990s. So yes, I do have that concern, but from my perspective, representing my members, this is a good bill. And I think the best thing this does is it is a target. The smaller houses will get a higher percentage exemption, which I think is the people that really need the assistance more than, somebody that's making a substantial amount of money. And with that, I hope I answered your question, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Moline. You had talked about indexing, and I may have missed some of what you were saying there, but there was a suggestion earlier that this could be done as a percentage by a prior witness. And that would deal with much of the indexing, I believe. But do you believe that as well, that would, if this were a percentage rather than a hard number, as you say, If it were a percentage, it would be able to adjust with the economy.
Go ahead, Mr. Moline.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, one of the problems, and I'm thinking real quick, but if you would make this a percentage, so it's a 10% exemption, the members that are at 200,000 would get still a substantial benefit. But the people that have $1 million house that perhaps aren't as, the exemption isn't as needed, you know, they would get, instead of a 20,000, they would get $1 million exemption. So the basis, if you're looking at this on the basis of need, keeping it a firm number rather than a percentage, in my opinion, just thinking right off the cuff, will be a greater benefit to the lower income, fixed income people that have smaller houses that perhaps have downsized. That's my initial thoughts, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm sure you have some of your members that have some of those more expensive homes. Do you believe that providing a greater exemption to somebody who pays more in taxes is obviously it's an economic policy for this body, but do you believe that's a good economic policy to provide relief for taxpayers who are paying in the greatest amount when they have received, some pretty substantial increases in their taxation over the last few years?
Go ahead, Mr. Moline.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, being trained as an ag economist, I'm going to say yes and no. You know, on one hand, yes, the people that pay more will get more back. But if I understand the goal of this legislation is to help out the lower income. And yeah, some of my members, especially, you know, if you put the garages, you know, the barns will be agriculture, the shops will be agriculture, so this bill will not impact that. But if the goal is to help out the lower income that have a greater need, this is the way to go. If you want to help everybody, doing it as a percentage, but I think we have to, and that's why I wanted to mention, I respect that you're going to work all these bills, because this bill works with this segment. Other bills work with different segments. You know, we've got the homestead exemption. If you've lived here for 25 years and you're over 65, well, then you get, I would assume, would be an additional exemption. So I think that's where I really respect getting all these bills together to, okay, what is the total impact? So sir, I like the dollar value if the goal is to help the lower income people, which through discussion, I think that's a large goal for this legislature. If your goal is to help everybody, then a percentage would be better. So it's a policy decision. More tax breaks is always a good thing for the citizen. I think private individuals can spend money better than the government. So more money in the hands of the private citizens, organizations is always a good thing. But it's what is your goal? I hope I answer. I know I beat around that bush. I ran around it 17 times.
Yeah, go ahead, follow up.
Thank you. And this is more of a clarification. I know you don't have the bill in front of you, but the good director did mention it that, you know, much of this bill, the way I read it, a little bit different from the chairman, the paragraph A is the one that applies to 2024. And then paragraph B applies to 2024 up until the last sentence. And then obviously the last sentence of that applies to subparagraph Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2. And then we're back to paragraph C, which is the payback to our subdivisions that you mentioned. So I do believe that, as you mentioned, the subparagraph C subparagraph C is much like A and B and applies to year one. So there would be a payback, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Right, and I think it does. I agree. And then I think when you go to paragraph D at the bottom of page 3, all the rest of that language is 2025. So I think is how that, it's all this application piece. Okay, very good. D and E as well. Okay.
Well, Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, if I may, there's one thing I do want to add. I really appreciate how the different business entities will still qualify. You know, the corporations, the partnerships, the trusts. I think the trusts are extremely important, you know, for tax planning. Many people have put their assets into a trust. So making it dang certain that they apply is a good stroke. And I also, you know, appreciate with the corporations, there's so many of my members, for several reasons, a lot of them being tax purposes, have incorporated. My family has a subchapter S corporation, realizing that only one house will qualify on the ranch, on my family property. But I do appreciate how that's in there to broaden out that support, to broaden out the impact of this bill.
Okay, and then I think you'd agree then on 2024, it's even broader. I mean, so if there's more than one home on the farm, they're gonna both qualify. That's the way I read for 2024 in paragraph A, which is fine. I don't have a problem with any of that. I just, doesn't matter who owns it or if it's rented or any of that thing. It's just not all these qualifiers for an application.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, the way I look at it, your goal is to help out people that own homes. And I think having, you know, so many operations do need to have, the only way you can get hired to hire people is to provide housing. And so I think I agree with you, sir.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony today. Appreciate it. Okay, members of the public, anybody else, come on up. Members of the public would like to comment on this bill. Sure appreciate it. Senator, good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, just introduce yourself for the record.
Senator Troy McEwen, Senate District 24. I kind of just want to, I wasn't going to speak on this, but I put a lot of work into it with some other people, and there's some things I want to make sure y'all understand the intent of the bill. The bill sunsets in 2 years, and the goal for that is, in the 2 years during the interim, we actually would like to work some property tax reform. So that's why it sunsets. This isn't the final answer. The other thing, this is the only vehicle out there right now that we can provide tax relief in 2024. So it gets it out there for everybody to see and use. And that's where we're at with it. That's why we put it together. It's kind of a two-prong approach. We got 2 years worth of relief and 2 years to rework the overall property tax system. And that's really what we were doing. It is backfilled in 24 and it is backfilled in 25. So if we don't get reform, it's as easy as changing the sunset date and traveling down the same road. I would like to see 2025, and if we get a chance to work on it, stay the same as 2024. Get rid of the application process. We should cover every house everybody owns. You own 2 houses, you own 2 houses. And I'd like to see it eventually go to a percentage break too. I think if you own a $10 million house, you should get the same tax break as if you own a $10 house. And we shouldn't punish people for being successful. And so I just kind of wanted to cover that real quick, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator McEwen? Vice Chair Oakley has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to, ask you about a comment that you made. saying that this is the only one that applies in 2024. But you are aware of House Bill 45 that I believe has been directed to your Senate Revenue Committee that you're on, and that it has the 2024 provisions and has from its inception.
I think,
Senator McEwen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think some of the testimony I've heard from the Department of Revenue, that bill's going to be quite a bit harder to implement. This bill is a simple entry into the CAMA system, and we're up and running.
I think I just want to, we've all got this list now. It's come out from LSO of the tax bills that are still alive. Now, our committee bills that we worked on the interim, House Bill 3 for long-term homeowners, you guys have that in Senate Revenue. I'm confident in that bill. The property tax refund program, House Bill 4, which that program, whether that bill lives or dies, that program is solid. We had, 9,000 homes apply for that. So we just put another tier into it, whether or not that, but that's still in Senate. That's in Senate Revenue. I think you're going to hear that. And then House Bill 45 is actually a cap bill. You're talking relief, but that is a reform bill. And, we're trying to go the constitutional route, remember, as a committee, and that constitutional amendment died in the House. And so there was a bill that was kind of a trigger with that to provide a constitutional cap. We just didn't hear it because there's no constitutional amendment on a cap. So there's no sense hearing that. But there is I don't want to get everybody in the public confused. House Bill 45 is not a relief bill like this. It's a reform bill with an exemption on the cap. And then and I would say that House Bill 52, the property tax homestead exemption, is really identical to this bill. It's just Speaker Summers' bill. So I don't know which vehicle, which horse will break a leg and not make the finish line. But some of these, I would just tell the people that there are multiple horses in this race still. And there's gonna be several of them finish. I'm hopeful. I think all of our committee bills are in good shape in your committee, in the Senate Revenue, 3, 4, and then I think there's one more out there too. I just want to remind the committee about. It was an individual bill, but that deferral program, House Bill 134, I think that was a Representative Lawley, and that's an interesting. That's a good bill for probably 5,000-10,000 people in this state will take advantage of, instead of going down that reverse mortgage route and spending all kinds of money. And this would be a much better way for, I think about the lady in Teton County wrote me this handwritten letter that they built their house 50 years ago, cut down the logs to do it, and now it's this multi-million-dollar thing. And so I think for those kind of people, so they're still out there. I just want to make sure all of us know there are a lot of vehicles. And this vehicle is going to keep alive too. We're not going to, I don't know, but I'm assuming this bill will keep moving forward. So, but I just want to assure the public of that. There's a lot of relief. The one reform bill is still out there, that House Bill 45 as well. So I'm hopeful our work will come to fruition the last 2 years or last year we've been working. So any more questions for the good Senator McEwen? Anybody else? Senator, appreciate you being here. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other folks here would like to, we have a couple online, one online for sure. Anybody else here? Okay, all right, let's go. Is anybody online? Okay, let's admit Assessor Meyer. And Mr. Senator McEwen, your bill is next. And if you want us to give you a call, or do you have a committee meeting you're in now? Yeah, can I do it real quick now? Well, we're in the middle of this bill, but are you going to be across the hall at one of these?
Probes.
Oh, you're on
He's gonna have one of these guys do his bill.
Can one of these gentlemen run for it? I think we all understand it. Okay, thank you. I didn't realize, we didn't want to keep you from that, so. Okay, thank you, Mr. Senator. Okay, Assessor Meyer is online. Can you hear us? We can see you, Assessor.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Good morning.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Revenue Committee. Pat Meyer, Park County Assessor. Just wanted to go over a few things with the exemption bill. Mobile homes, for instance, to have them in there, it's gonna be hard to, you're exempting pretty much all mobile homes unless for some reason they're on some land. So there's no mobile homes that are gonna be valued at $200,000. So you might want to keep that in mind for this type of exemption. And we do have another personal property bill coming up that they could also qualify, and that's more like 20,000 off. So I wanted you to keep that in mind. I also, on this type of exemption bill, when all houses are getting this relief, I still have not been cleared on the duplexes, fourplexes, and triplexes, if they will be getting this exemption. Do they qualify because they're not technically a single family resident? They are, and a lot of them are rentals, but we have more single family rentals than we do duplexes and fourplexes. So I don't believe we can give it to single family residents, mobile homes, condos, and so forth that are used for rentals and not give them for those to keep it fair and equal. The other thing I'll just add too is getting parts that you have buildings as commercial and you have them on residential properties too. We do have a property type in the CAMA system that would say commercial, and they're quite easy for us to break out ourselves, at least in Park County. I don't see where that would be a really major problem, but I don't know how the rest of the assessors have that, but we can pull those out on any property. So that wouldn't be a problem for us. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for the good assessor? Okay, I think Representative Bear has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Assessor Meyer, for being here. There's been quite a bit of discussion over the last few weeks about how the CAMA system can be used to gather this information. And this particular bill is giving a one-year period for assessors to prepare for this, to break it up. You mentioned that your methodology would allow you to get this information fairly quickly. Is that one-year time frame reasonable, and really, how long would it take you with the way you've divided up your properties?
Well, I think this would, Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, I think this type of exemption would be very easily done. I mean, it's not that hard. It can be done automatically. I don't think there'd be any problems. I don't think you should have mobile homes. You have to remember, we don't get sales on personal property. Therefore, we more or less do mobile homes by a cost system. Replacement cost, new, less depreciation. So mobile homes are valued not very much money. I mean, it's not, it happens that you can have a mobile home and you can be paying taxes under $100. So they're really not the ones that are going up like everybody else. So mobile homes is a different thing, probably should belong in personal property, although they do get rented out and so forth, and you do make money, but the tax bill for what the services they get are not very much.
Okay, very good. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assessor Meyer, you brought up this cost approach on mobile homes, and we've also been discussing that issue within the assessment program, especially as it applies to commercial property. This replacement cost approach, just from your perspective, is residential pretty much done as a comparable process, or is there a cost methodology within the residential, or is that cost or that replacement methodology exclusively in the commercial as it applies to these properties?
Go ahead, assessor. I think on the market value, a little different, I think, with residents with the sales, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, yes, it all starts out with the cost approach, but cost does not equal market value. We all start out Valuing, the land value comes first. We value the land usually by direct comparisons to what vacant land is selling for. Then we rebuild your house, we give it depreciation, and then we analyze what they're actually selling for, and we adjust to what they're actually selling. You have to remember, replacement cost new less depreciation rarely equals market value. It's always much of the lesser value. With commercial property, because we get so few sales, we have to rely more on the cost approach, less depreciation on commercial buildings, because we don't have sales. They're all different. You can't see a retail store could sell for one thing, but you can't do an adjustment to get that on, because then you have warehouses and that are totally different. So we rely a lot on the cost approach for commercial properties, and always have. A lot of times in Park County, when we're starting to get way low on commercial property in general, we show the increases by the land value to get up from where it's located at. I hope that answers your question, Representative Bear.
And just to add on to that question, Assessor, and would that be, I mean, generally, commercial properties don't see the huge increases like we've seen in residential properties. Is that because basically these fewer sales and so you're forced to use the cost approach?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions for the good assessor? Okay, very good. We appreciate you joining us this morning. How are things in Cody? Wonderful?
Things are going good. The wind isn't blowing today for the first time, so we're doing okay.
Very nice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, Ms. Assessor Meyer, are you still there?
Yep.
Okay, we've got a question coming in from Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at our own GIS property in Teton and just want to confirm, when I look there, the assessment is divided between the land and the improvement generally. And so if this bill just applies to residential structure, it would only be applied to the improvement piece of the valuation of the property. Is that your understanding?
Assessor.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, that is my understanding. But I believe in this one, isn't it including 200,000 off on the whole entire property? Is how I'm seeing this. And maybe in the future, when we go to primary property next year, will that then be going against just the primary structure of the residential? That I'm not sure, but for this year, we're going against the entire property, land and buildings.
Okay. I agree as well. I think it covers everything this first year. Okay, Representative Storr has another question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at Director Henson and want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Brenda Henson, Representative Storr. So the definition that is on page 5, starting on line 11, is applicable to both years, and it does include the residential structure, and it does state privately owned single-family dwelling unit, the associated improved land, and other structures associated with the residential structure, including garages, sheds, and other outbuildings. So that's applicable for 2024 and 2025. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, any questions for Assessor Meyer? Or hang in there, Assessor Meyer, you're not done yet, I'm afraid. Okay, did you have a follow-up, Representative Storr? Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe our Assessor Association Chair indicated, though, that the language on page 5, line 14 through 17, that includes the associated improved land and other structures. My understanding is that makes it harder to implement this bill for 2024. Is that correct?
And Director, why don't you, and then Assessor.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storer, the challenge comes when there are properties that the assessor has appraised that property at $200,000. If there are other items such as, well, first, if it's all residential and the $200,000 is already accounted for in just the residence and the land, then you don't have to look to the other outbuildings. It's just in those situations where you've got an agricultural operation and making sure that if it's part of the commercial agricultural operation, that is not considered on the $200,000. But if the residence and the land associated meets the $200,000, you're not going to have to worry about the outbuildings. And I believe that was testified to. I did want to clarify that our interpretation of this bill was that you receive a $200,000 homestead exemption on that account. We did not interpret this legislation to mean that if I've got 3 houses on that property, that we would have 3 separate $200,000 homestead exemptions. So perhaps that does need to be clarified. We have other pieces of legislation that are specific to a residential structure and provide some relief for that residential structure. Perhaps it's not clear here, and we certainly hadn't calculated it that way in our analysis.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Assessor Meyer, any comments on any of that?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I would agree with that. There are plenty of ranches with multiple houses on it, multiple families. They would be a little challenging, but I believe we could figure, would they all get it, I guess would be the question. Usually if they do, and let's say they're on a ranch, we give them an acre homestead with their house. I would think that would be the way to go. Now, multiple houses on, sometimes we'll have a homestead with more acres on it than just the one, but they're easier to break out as well too. So I would think for agricultural property, pretty much the basis are 1 acre and the house, and how much would that sell for on the market is, well, that's how we do it in Park County.
Okay, and Director, you add to that.
Mr. Chairman, one follow-up. If we look on page 2, line 10, now granted, this is the language that talks about not more than 1 exemption under this paragraph shall apply to the same property in any year. That's where we interpreted that it was 1 homestead exemption per property.
Per property, and if that paragraph B is not in all of our bills, in fact, I think House Bill 52 doesn't have that, but anyway, okay, well, that's very good. We can work on that when we get working the bill. Okay, very good. Any other questions of the Director? Oh, Director, I don't think you were done yet. Representative Locke has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and sorry, Director, I didn't, my bad. But just real quick, this is just for clarification for a question that was asked by a person before. In paragraph B, I don't read this, that this is restricted if for some reason there's 2 families living. It just means that only 1 exemption can be requested. Is that an accurate interpretation? That's how I read it. I wanted to be sure that was accurate.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, you are correct. When we read the rest of that B where it talks about 1 exemption under this paragraph, including any property that houses more than 1 family. But keeping in mind that we need to kind of flesh this out, this is talking about once we get an application process going.
Oh.
And so, and unless we have the application process in place, how do we determine those items? But your statement was accurate.
So, good question. I think for the whole committee, I'll ask everybody, but let's talk about that paragraph B. I mean, when I first read this bill, I thought the line was on line 9 and paragraph B, and then there was some conversation that maybe, paragraph B was just the last sentence of paragraph B, as I understand some of our conversations. So is any members, I guess my thoughts were paragraph B could go away if you wanted to do this as a pretty simple exemption.
And Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, on page 5, where it does say single-family dwelling unit, this homestead exemption is not applicable to 2, 3, 4 family units. This is a single-family dwelling unit. The question was specific to, what if I'm renting out my basement? And so you've got 2 families in that. That's still a single-family
Right.
unit, and that's how it would be marketed, and that's how it is inventoried.
And that's how it currently is.
Correct.
Right. I mean, we've got people, as we had in the witness say, and certainly Laramie at the university, people have those issues, those same situations. Very good. Okay, we're continuing. Okay, I think the vice chair has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess, while you're up here, last time you had offered to give us the language, page 3, paragraph C, as far as the reporting coming from the assessors in 105A24 instead of the, do you want to go ahead and do that while you're here?
Certainly. I'll provide, I've got copies for the committee. What this document represents is just the language that's currently in 3911-102, which is the administrative piece.
She's the treasurer.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, again, this language, it just outlines the entire process that we currently use for veterans exemption. I would suggest that we could just add 3911-105A, make sure I've referenced this exemption, but basically what this homestead exemption statute number is right after that on the second line. So that we're just saying veterans exemption and the homestead exemption. We've already got forms, we've already got processes in place. So that would take us all the way down to basically 16, because it's on 17 where it identifies where the money comes from. So I think you have to leave that in there if that is still your intent. But the rest of it this other statute can take the place. And you don't have to have all this language specific in this law because it's already in the administration requirements for the county assessor, and we just add this statute.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, now we do have one more online of the treasurer from Sublet. If we can, is that right on this? Can you admit? Ms. Paravicini? Treasurer, good morning, we can see you.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can, loud and clear.
All right. Good morning, committee. Emily Parvicini, Sublette County Treasurer. I just wanted to let you know that I was here if you had any questions regarding the treasurer's role in this bill. I do appreciate the good director, her testimony just a moment ago about the forms, since we do already process the exemption for the veterans. If we can use that same form, or if there's another form that the department would provide for us so that we can have it uniform across the board to make sure that we're asking for the correct money for the backfill on this bill. I know that there's nothing in here that says anything about the exemption being put on the tax bills. Again, we would ask that that would be included, that exemption would show on the tax bill so people know that they've got it. And then I would just stand for any questions if you have any.
Okay, questions of the good treasurer? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This morning, appreciate it. Okay, any other members of the public would like to testify on this bill? Okay, appreciate the kids still staying with us. It's pretty exciting, isn't it? Yeah. I'm reading all your body language back there. It looks pretty exciting. Everybody's on the edge of their seat. Okay. Yeah, would one of you like to testify on this bill? Nobody? Careful, you come to a meeting, sometimes you get called on to testify. But appreciate y'all being here. Okay, so we're gonna close public comment then on this bill. And seeing no other public comment. Members, what's your pleasure?
You want to move it and then lay it back later? Or you want to not move it?
Well, members, we've got 30 minutes. I'd like to, maybe we could, this next little bill we have, 68 is a little bill. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, probably take more conversation than what we imagined, but I'd like to, well, maybe we can just lay this back and keep working it and kind of get and work on 68. What do you think? It's really up to the members. What's your pleasure with this bill?
Let's go 68.
Okay, so we've moved 54.
Sure.
And then, and we can,
And then,
what's that?
You need to say who moved and seconded.
It's been moved by Representative
Locke. I think.
Locke down here. I can't hear you. And then,
Strzok, I think.
Ms.
seconded.
Strzok was the second. Okay, sure. I think we're all in the, okay. Members, what do you want to do with this bill? I think we're going to do some work on it, and I've kind of told you at the beginning, I think we want to get rid of this application piece, and I don't think we appropriate out of the legislative, the LSRA. It should be a general fund if we're going to do that. And then there's some other little changes to it, but, we're pretty well familiar with these homestead exemption bills. Okay, do we want to work through this? Okay, let's flip over to page 2. Any amendments on page 2, members? So any thoughts on, really on paragraph B below the second year? Any thoughts on that? You want me to make a motion?
I think you had some very good thoughts. You should think that.
Well, I just, and the chair can make motions, but I prefer for you to do. But I think this whole application piece in the second year is a ton of work for a one-year program. And I guess I always think about, what about the person who, geez, I didn't know about it, and I didn't apply for it and was eligible for it. And that's the kind of stuff I just think it, if we want to give the relief, let's give the relief and go from there. So that's my thoughts on it, to just make both years the same, basically, as the first year.
That whole thing.
Well, and I think we want
For
to
sure.
talk about how that would work on paragraph B and the rest of it. So take a look, but
Well, so Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead and Representative Swanitzer.
Let me make a motion. We'll see if it gets amended. I move to delete page 2, lines 21 through page 3, line 5. And that would take out the application piece. But if somebody wants to friendly amend that to make it wider, let me know, but that's what I'll do for now.
So just repeat that again.
Page 2, lines 21 through 23, and page 3, 1 through 5. Delete. Is there another part to that?
Okay, is there more to that? Representative Bear, your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest that we need to go back to line 19 where it states primary residence, because I think it's the use of the word primary residence that pulls in subparagraph 2 there, Roman numeral 2. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but
I think that, well, if there is no 2, it's not, you're talking 2 on page 2, 21 through 23.
on page 2, I'm looking back at paragraph 1.
Right.
Line 19, it has a semicolon there that, I think it's that use of the word primary residence that's requiring this application. Because the CAMA system doesn't know if it's a primary residence or not. So if we're going to remove this paragraph 2, we should probably adjust that language in paragraph 1.
Yep, okay.
Okay, Representative
I
Swanson?
think that's correct. So it probably makes sense to leave everything 17 through 23 on page 2 and 1 through 5 on page 3.
That's what, okay, that was my original scratch as well, but okay, very good. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, moved by Representative Swanson, seconded by Northrop. Okay, any questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's been adopted. Representative Vice Chair Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not gonna make the motion right now. I mean, I guess I could, but I'd like to at least get the feel before I do. As far as reducing the exemption, it seems like we've gotten fairly casual about doing a pretty high exemption. And I don't know if there's a discussion that this has over a $300 million effect. So what I would do if I made a motion would be to lower the exemption. So can we have just discussion on that before I actually make a motion?
I think House Bill 52, was that 100,000? My memory, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think though, we're in the middle of working this bill. If you want to make the motion, or if you just want to signal a future motion, that's fine, but I don't want to delve off in that deal unless we have a motion here. So it's up to you. If not, I'm going to keep working it.
Go ahead.
Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's worth us kind of maybe having a discussion based on the conversation that took place on the floor of the House the other day with House Bill 52, what we want to do as a goal here. There we looked at different amounts. We debated 1 or 2 years, and we debated percentage versus dollar amount. And to the degree we can, as a group, decide where we want to land on those 3 things, I think then we'll have more success probably moving forward. This bill right now at 200,000 is 300 million just for the first year. And we don't know what the second year is because we don't, but let's assume 75% of 300 million if it only applies to primary. And Representative Bear is correct that it's the primary language that requires the application. So the sense I got from the floor of the House the other day was we wanted to do it 1 year because it doesn't require an application, and then we'll have an opportunity to think about what we want to do after the constitutional amendment passes, and we have a little more flexibility. And then we could talk about how much we want to spend. And then we can also talk about percentage versus dollar number, I think, at that point in time.
Sure.
But I feel like if we could figure out those first 2,
No, and those are all motions to the bill then. Somebody wants to
Right.
make a motion. We know how the bill states now. It's 2 years. I think we've just we just adopted a motion to eliminate we did vote, didn't we? Yeah, oh yeah, we voted. It was unanimous. And then, so that, there is no longer an application in this bill. It's a 2-year bill, 200,000 per year out of the LSRA. And I'd like to so let's make motions if you want to change it, but Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make a motion on page 2, line 6, deleting 2 at the end of that line to 1, and then carrying on to page 7, changing that 200,000 to 100,000.
Okay, it's been moved by Representative Byron and seconded by Vice Chair Oakley. So the motion, I think we all understand this. We've been debating it for a month. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think you just hit the nail on the head there. We make changes here, and it's gonna get debated on the floor. I prefer leaving this right where it's at in this regard, because we've already had one body debate this, come up with this number. Let's find out what our body, by passing this on out to the body, let that debate happen there if we want to change it from where the other body landed. So I'll be against this motion here.
Okay, any other discussion? Question on that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, that's been adopted. Okay, so we're at 100,000 for 2 years. Okay, we're gonna continue on moving. Okay, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 3, and you can help me with this, but basically line 17, taking it out of the LISRA, changing that to general fund.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved by Representative Oakley, seconded by Representative Northrup. Okay, and I just think that's the way, I think it's a better way to appropriate money. The LSRA will backfill that. The LSRA, we've tried to, there's been appropriations out of it, but generally it's generally been used as a more of a balancer or a backfill or a, the movement issue to, as timing of funds in state government. So I think it's more appropriate at a general fund. Okay. Everybody understands the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, that's been adopted. Okay, any thoughts on page 3 with the director's proposed language on paragraph C to kind of, on this whole report back piece,
Mr.
kind
Chairman,
of clean that up? Representative Bear.
I move that we adopt the language that the director suggested, where we're bringing this particular paragraph into the 3911-102K, second line of that paragraph. We'll include this 3911-105A Romanet. Looks like that's 24. Thank you.
Yep. Very good. Is there a second? Representative Oakley on the second. Representative Bear made the motion. Okay, I think we all understand the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's been adopted. Okay, members, flipping over on to, now let's just talk about,
Line 5 yet? Line 4.
we're on 3, so we're now on paragraph D, which starts at the bottom of 3, right, and carries over to 4. Now, is this language, I don't think it's needed. This is application language in my mind, right? So all of D, I think, is, can go
On a
away.
different copy. I don't think we have D.
I'm on engrossed. It's at the bottom of page 3.
Yeah, just
It says D, used in this paragraph. Okay. I don't think any of this language. Director, you want to come up, clarify, you'll be implementing this if it's. Go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Brenda Henson, I agree with you in that starting at the bottom of 3, where we've got D as used in this paragraph, everything could be deleted through page 5, line 11,
Exactly.
but we need residential real property shall mean would probably be the new D.
It would be the new D, and that includes land, outbuildings, all those things.
Unless we change.
Yeah, very good. Folks, any amendments? To remove D through Roman 2, I guess it is.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we remove all of D, starting on page 3, line 22, through page 5, line 10, and renumber as necessary.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Vice Chair Oakley, moved by Representative Bear. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's been adopted.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, and we're on page 5, but go ahead, Representative Bear.
I think here in the new paragraph D, we need to do something about mobile homes. Yeah, I think we heard testimony pretty clearly that this was gonna make the implementing more difficult, and I hope that if we remove mobile homes, that we then address that issue in this other bill that we have before us today. So I'm going to move that we strike the word mobile home on line 13 of page 5. Now, we did not hear testimony on modular home, so I assume that it's not gonna fall under that,
Right, I
that
think
issue.
it's not a personal property statute. Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Zwanitzer. Okay, question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good. And moving to the bottom of page 25 and then over to 26. Or I mean, over to
Mr. Chairman.
6. And I think we're in pretty good shape. Did somebody have a question?
I have a motion sometime.
Okay, Representative Zwanitzer.
Thanks. Page 5, line 15, I would like to delete other structures associated with the residential structure. And you'd have to fix the "and," but just delete the other structures associated. I think the testimony said that would help out our assessors.
And then.
So you'd leave garage, sheds, and outbuildings.
I would leave garage, sheds, and outbuildings, yes.
So it'd read associate improved land, including garage, sheds, and outbuildings.
And you'd have to add an "and," line 14. But yes.
Right. It would,
Okay? And is there a second?
second.
Seconded by Representative Storr. Okay, discussion?
I just want to clarify
Go ahead,
the
Representative.
amendment that it reads. We've taken out mobile home, right? So residential rural property means a structure intended for human habitation, including a house, modular home, or condominium that is a privately owned single-family dwelling unit and the associated improved land. Is that,
Including garage, sheds, and other
oh,
outbuildings.
I thought we were taking that language out.
No, just other structures associated with the residential structure. So the language that's proposed to be removed.
Question.
Hopefully nobody lives in a shed.
Any further discussion? Okay, question. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's been adopted.
We don't have any dates to change now that we got rid of the application process. Is that accurate? Because I'm talking about the dates.
I think the dates are all fine in this bill.
Mr. Chairman?
It starts, let me, on page 6, section 2, it starts this tax year, and it will not apply, it was repealed July 1st, 2026, and shall not apply to the 26 tax year. So this clearly, I think, states it's a 24 and 25 tax year. Okay, any other amendments, members?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go back to page 2, line 6, and change the actual definition of the exemption to be 25% of fair market value of the property rather than
Rather than
$100,000.
100,000, that's amended. Okay, is there a second? Second, Representative Bear, second. Go ahead, Representative Storr.
Just to look back, I just was crunching numbers once again last night. So what we have is a statewide property tax increase average over the last 3 years of 57%. But that increase rate really varies from county to county. Some counties are as low as 20% over 3 years, and some like Lincoln and Teton are like 100%. And Park County is, I think, kind of 70%, somewhere in there. So you have both the difference in the rate of increases across different counties, and you also have the amount of the increase that's varied based on the property value of the property. So we know that the same house in different places actually is valued differently and therefore is taxed differently. And, I just think as a result, people have paid a lot of taxes, and a lot of taxes are coming from the high-value counties. And I still think, especially if we're including both land and structures in this, at least associated land with the structures, we've got, I was just looking at my own neighborhood, for example. You've got a 1,200 square foot townhome on 0.08 lot, hardly any land. And their taxes have gone from $2,500 a year to $5,000, over $5,000 a year for a property like that. And then just across the street, essentially, you've got a property that is like still pretty modest, 1,500 square foot, single-family home, built a little later, like in 1996, and it's on a quarter-acre lot. That quarter-acre lot has a value over $1 million. So their property tax is $10,000 a year, and it's also doubled. So it's people like that that I'm really trying to, if we're going to do an exemption, I really feel like the fairest way to do that is with a percentage number, and at least everybody gets an equal value of what the exemption provides.
Any other discussion? Representative Northrop?
Thank you.
And then Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what's that 25% exemption gonna amount to dollar-wise? Do you have that number?
Can you work some examples? I think go ahead.
So as I recall, I think it was close to in the $125 million range for 1 year. So I think it was less than the $100,000 is about $156 million. If it's applying to all residential structures, all 240,000, I believe. I think it's about 156 million. So this would be a little bit less.
I think examples like, the average home minus Teton is a little over 300,000 in Wyoming. And, the average with Teton's 390, and then, so I think, is that what you were asking, or were you asking the dollar amount?
But we're gonna have to backfill.
Backfill, okay, so we
Right,
got
so-
the answer on that, so it's a little less, okay.
The-
Very good. Any other questions? Representative Bear had the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but a statement. I seconded this motion because I believe it is a fair methodology. But I will just tell you I was just doing the numbers on my personal home, with this being reduced to 100,000 and then changed to 25%. I actually would personally do better with 100,000, but I prefer this, even though those people with a more expensive home are going to get a better break, because it is a fairness issue. Those are the people that are paying a larger amount into the state and to the local governments based on their tax bill. So I believe it's the right thing to do, and even though it would hurt me personally.
What about, I'd ask both the sponsor and co-sponsor. Remember when this bill, when it left the joint committee, it had both. It was like 28%, not to exceed 200,000. And so that's really how we'd compromise as a committee, and to kind of, anyway, so comments on that. Any thoughts? Representative Swanson.
I guess my hope, Mr. Chairman, is voting in favor of the amendment, and then if we're going to hold the bill for a bit, we could ask the department to crunch the numbers.
Yeah.
So before the final vote, we'd have a pretty good idea of what perhaps a difference is. But I do think it's fair and would vote in favor if the plan is to hold it so we can crunch the numbers before our next meeting.
Okay, and so that motion is, okay, Representative Byron.
Quickly on the motion, I think it's important for this body to know and maybe bring up upstairs that, we talk a lot about Teton, but we need to remember our counties like Lincoln, and other counties of the Lincoln situation where those homes were $100,000-$200,000 and getting all the way down into the middle part of Lincoln County, we're now talking about an average home that's $600,000-$800,000. So with all due respect to my wonderful colleague to the north, I think it's really important to not just center in on some of those examples, but expand it out to these folks that, and 4 or 5 years ago bought these homes for $200,000-$300,000 and now our, neighbors are selling for $700,000, $800,000. So obviously on and for this motion, and I do appreciate the opportunity, hopefully, to get some of those numbers crunched and get a better idea, because I think to Representative Bear's point, it really is, and we heard some testimony, really the most fair way to do it, so.
Okay, I think we understand. Any other discussion on it? So the motion is the percentage again?
25.
25%, okay? Everybody, okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. Okay, that motion has been adopted. Okay, members, it is 9:53. And Representative Wanitzer, do you have another motion, or?
If there's no amendments, Mr. Chairman, I would move to lay the bill on the table and pursue it at our next meeting.
At our next meeting. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so we're gonna lay, that motion's passed, so we're gonna lay this back, and you folks who've been in our committee, remember when the House bills were coming, we did several like noon meetings. And I know we've got members at noon, but we'll try to work this thing out as the Senate. Our bill numbers have certainly dropped, and so the time thing, I think we're a little more flexible. So we'll just wait for that meeting notice, and I'll work with the committee to try to alleviate any conflicts. Hey, thank you all for coming, and appreciate you all being here, and have a wonderful day. And so we are adjourned. Thank you.